The Japanese and Indian relations are among the largest bilateral partnerships today in Asia. It encompasses both human capital and economic power. These two have contributed so much to Asia's socio-economic associations today and will continue to do so in the future that is to come. Yet, however, their geographic locations are quite far from each other, and each nation could have specifically gotten close to its neighboring countries for its trade, investments, and cultural ties. But it still overlooked its neighboring nations and chose each other to have a somewhat special economic relation. So how did the Japanese and Indian relations come to be? Before we move on, don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe for more. The historical relations with each other date way back to 752, when the earliest documentation of direct contact from each other came to be. It was around the same time that the religion that both countries share, which is Buddhism, came to be. It is a cultural tie that both Japan and India share till today, and we believe that this has played a hugely influential factor in how Japan has viewed India, and vice versa. Data from the Japanese Government Agency for Cultural Affairs estimated that in 2018, there are about 84 million Buddhists in the nation, which is 67% of the entire population. There is also documentation that dates way back to the cotton era, when Japan was importing India's textile industry. Fast forward to the recent centuries, when India was still under British rule, around the start of the 20th century, the two nations established a union called the Indo-Japanese Association, and because of the Anglo-Japanese alliances, the relations would further be enhanced. Because of this relationship, the two nations would start trading, and by 1934, the two nations signed a trade agreement. But these would unfortunately go downhill during the start of the Second World War, as the two nations had their own alliances. India aligned with the United Kingdom, while Japan aligned with Germany. The end of the war, however, is the start of one of the greatest relationships in Asia. During the council that would judge Japan for its war crimes, India's representative Rabindranath Pal would go on for his fair judgment that would go down in history. Because of this, the Japan-India relations would emerge very favorably, and by 1947, India's independence, Japan was one of the first nations to recognize the nation. At this point, the relations are starting to emerge very admiringly. This would follow to 1952, when an official diplomatic relation was established. Because of this treaty, the emergence of its trade relations would emerge, and during the time that Japan was rebuilding, India was helping Japan. Throughout the next decades, the two nations would exchange their cultural ties and their economic ties. The Japanese-Indian relations would emerge the two countries' love for the same food, love for the same religion, and love for the same entertainment. By the 21st century, the Japanese-Indian relations would emerge as a strong economic ally. Japan would become the country's largest source of foreign investments and would help it from technical cooperation to economic investments and grant aids. Even the Japanese company's presence in the nation would also grow. Data from the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, or JICA for short, saw that from 2008 to 2017, the number of Japanese companies operating in the country grew from 550 to 1,369. Furthermore, the Japanese investments, loans, technical assistance, and cooperations would also pave the way for many of the Indian infrastructure that we see today. Take a look at the nation's transportation sectors, which are held by Japan. From the Delhi Mass Rapid Transit System to Bengaluru and Chennai Metro Rail projects to Ahmedabad and Mumbai Metro projects are just some of the many more out there. Japan's presence in the country's energy and water sector has also grown. According to 2018 data, JICA was responsible for over 9.3 gigawatts of energy capacity, which is worth over $1.2 billion. The most recent development was when the current Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, met his counterpart of India, Narendra Modi, for a talk in New Delhi. Conversations about deepening security and economic ties, which ended with Japan announcing to invest over $42 billion over the next 5 years. One of the biggest packages it has ever done in its history of international trade and investments. Surprisingly, from 2000 to 2019, the total collective investments Japan has done to India was around $32 billion, but by the next 5 years, we are looking at something bigger. This suggests that the two nations' relations are on the path to becoming one of Asia's most important relationships.